Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking at the second video for circular art. And what we're going to be trying to do here is find the center of a piece of paper. And we're going to do that using fractions. Okay? The reason we want to do that, first of all, I'm going to show you just the center of a piece of paper here. We are not going to be folding. And the reason we're not going to be folding, right here I can see I have the center of this paper, because if I folded a paper in half and I fold it in half again, then that takes me right to the center, because I am halfway between here and here, halfway between here and here. And what we're going to be doing is creating a circle around the center point of a paper, but we don't want to have all these folds in it, okay, because we're trying to do some art here and we don't want it to be messy. Okay, so what we're going to do is use lines to do that and not folds, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a line that's halfway between this side of the paper and this side of the paper. Okay, it's going to be parallel, meaning it's going to be running right even with this and even with this. It's going to be the same distance throughout, okay? But I'm going to use that using a ruler. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure the piece of paper, okay? And hopefully you can zoom in if you need to. I'm putting the 0 right on one edge of the piece of paper and going all the way to the other side. And what I can see is that that is 8.5 inches. I'm going to write this lightly, 8.5 inches all the way across. A standard piece of paper is 8.5 by 11.5. Okay, and I want to cut this in half. I want to find the halfway point, and so I'm going to use some math to do that. Okay, so this is a mixed number. I have my whole number and the 8 whole inches in my half, and I'm going to turn that to a mixed fraction, so, or an improper fraction. So 8 wholes is the same as 16 halves. If I had 16 halves of an apple, then I would have 8 whole apples. So 8 wholes plus 1/2 is the same as 8.5. Okay, so I can add these together, and instead of having 8.5, I have 17 halves. 17 halves is the whole length of this, and there's 8.5. If I counted my halves, there's 1/2, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves. I would count up 17 halves here, okay? And what I want to do is I want to take half of that length. So I want half of 17 halves. Of means to multiply, okay? So I want half of that, and we're going to just use the math we know to multiply this across. Okay, but I'm going to explain where that's coming from. So 17 times 1 is 17. 2 times 2 is 4. And I have 17 quarters here. Okay, 17 quarters. Well, if I wanted to turn that, find out how many whole numbers I have there, I'd divide it. 17 divided by 4. Well, 16 divided by 4 is 4. So I can say that 16 fourths plus that extra fourth or quarter, that gives me 16 divided by 4 is 4 1/4. So what that tells me is that this piece of paper is 8.5 inches, and if I go to 4 1/4 inches, I'm going to be able to split this guy in half. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. I'm lined back up. 0 is on the edge of the paper. That mark right here is on the edge of the paper, and my 8.5 is on this edge. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, and 1 more 1/4 inch. The quarter is a sort of medium line. I can look at it again. Here's my 4, here's 5, here's 4.5, and 1/2 of a half is 1/4. Okay, 1/4, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters, 4 1/4 is right there. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this all the way down to the bottom of the paper, and I'm going to go, can you see that? Let's see. Okay, make sure you can see it. I'm not right on the edge of the bottom. I'm a little bit off of it, but I'm going to go ahead and go 0 here. 8.5 is there, and I'm marking 4 1/4 right there. There's 4 inches, and there's that extra quarter. And what I'm going to do now, let's make sure you can see the whole thing, is I'm going to place my ruler along those 2 marks. We can call them points, but they're really marks here. I want to be able to see them both and line up my pencil. Thumbs down, my fingers are down, and I'm coming along here and running that just lightly, not too heavy, and it's always going to be easier if you pull your pencil and not push it. Pushing it can sort of cause it to stick there. And what I've done is I basically, instead of folding in half, now I've got a line going right down the middle, and a line can erase while a fold cannot erase. Okay? So we're halfway home. If you also thought about this too, 8.5, well, if I wanted to take half of 8 inches, that'd be 4 inches, but I have to deal with that extra ½ inch. Let's see, make sure you can see it. And what is a half of a half? Well, if I split this guy in half, it'd be this mark, which is 1/4 inch. So all I'm doing here with the math is showing that half of 8.5, half of 8 is 4 inches, but I need to take care of half of this ½ inch extra, and that'd be 4 1/4. Okay, I'm going to lie this here so you can see the whole piece of paper, and I'm going to split this line in half. Okay, a standard piece of paper is 11 inches across. Make sure that that measures right. Here's my 0 hash mark here, going all the way across to the 11 mark way over here. Zoom in if you need to, pause it and zoom in. Okay, and I want to find out what is half of, it means I'm multiplying half of 11 inches. Well, what I'm doing is just dividing 11 in half. This is my improper fraction, meaning I have way more parts than a whole number. Okay, so I have 11 halves. What is 11 halves? Well, it's 11 divided by 2 would be, I can get 10 halves out of that and have 1 extra. 10 halves, if I had 10 halves of an apple, I would have 5 apples, and there's my extra half. So 11 halves, and I can count this one along for you. There's 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves, 7 halves, 8 halves, 9 halves, 10 halves. 11 halves is 5.5 inches. Okay, and the whole thing across would be 22 halves. Okay, but 11 halves is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I just found the center of the paper. And there's my center mark there. We're going to be making circles off of that point, okay? So to get this checked off, you're going to need to show your work here. And these lines might be crooked at first, okay? I'm not going to sign off on crooked lines because I want you to be able to do this right, and you can do this right. So embrace the struggle. No one said this is going to be easy, but it will be worth it for you because you're going to be able to have all sorts of tools that you didn't have before. Okay, so push through it. Be ready to go back and try some things over and over again. It's just going to be what we're going to be doing. Okay, good luck. There's my center point.